It's common that most people don't recognize the needs of the spouse to find their own recovery and healing. The great lack of understanding on the part of a woman who's experienced betrayal trauma and the breakdown of trust is the feeling that if my husband is in recovery, then I will be okay. As long as he gets his things worked out, then I'll be okay. And that's oftentimes the feeling of the spouse, and oftentimes the feeling of those that are there to provide support for the spouse.
When we have our addicted spouse in our center, that the chaos, the confusion, the trauma continue, no matter what. Whether we're trying to love them more, love them out of it, or are so angry we can't stand it, and we feel such resentment and frustration. Either way, he's in the center. So how do I get God back in my center, or in my center at all? Even at the second disclosure and the third disclosure, I knew there was only one place to turn. Much of it is in my desire to surrender my will to God. And I have a hard time with that if I don't believe that He loves me. So a person who is needing to learn that God loves me as I am, imperfect, very human, He loves me, and He'll listen to me. And He will direct me. So I did some things that were really what I call self-care. I remember going for long walks, and it was in the fall, so it was a beautiful time of year, and I would go for a long walk, and I would look at the mountains. I would look at the sky. I would look up. It was just to get outside and try and get centered with God at my center. And I tried to do that nearly every day. Being honest about my needs and my emotions was hard. It's hard because I'm afraid that if I'm honest that I'm sad, I'm going to upset my husband. And I had to learn to be honest. I had to say, I'm sad, or I am upset, or I'm triggered by a situation. And it took me a very long time, even years. I'm still working on that. Being okay saying, I am feeling, and not being afraid that if I'm feeling something, that He's going to make it about Him. And I have a mantra, be direct, do no harm. It was interesting when I finally recognized that my recovery mirrored my husband's so exactly. My education was critical on what I was dealing with as far as my own behavior, let alone his addictive behaviors. Some qualified therapy for sure, someone who knows and understands how to deal with sexual addiction trauma. Most surprising for me was 12-step. I did not want to do it, and I certainly didn't think I needed it. But when I started working in the 12 steps, calling my sponsor, being accountable for my own behavior, and working on strengthening myself, not just working on this is about his issue. It became a great gift. It is all about how do I become strengthened, empowered, courageous, strong in what I believe to be right. And that it's huge for the way I feel about myself and about the way I can interact with other people.
But it is important for her to understand that unless she's willing to work on her recovery and her own healing, that she's going to carry difficult experiences that she hasn't healed from.
I believe, and I've said this openly, if I had not found my recovery, even though he was working recovery, I believe we would be divorced today. Because I was tired of living my life in fear and resentment and all the negatives that I was carrying around with me, even though they were stuffed pretty deep.